This morning, I'm happy to be joined by several individuals and by one of our deputy chiefs. And she's the deputy chief of Prevention, Intervention, and Trauma, Dr. Jamie Banks, will be joining, and Darcy Krause, executive director of the Uplift Center for Grieving Children. Tomorrow is National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day, and the entire month of May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. So we'll take some time to discuss the many ways the district, along with its partnership with the Uplift Center for Grieving Children, are working together to support the emotional well-being of our students and school communities. But before we begin, as always, I'd like to share a few district updates. First, this week is National Teacher Appreciation Week, and I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to all the dynamic teachers who give the time, effort, and talent to support our students and their families on a daily basis. This has been such an extraordinary year, and through it all, our teachers have gone above and beyond to make sure their students receive the education they need while learning remotely for the better part of a year. And now that we have teachers back in classrooms, engaging with students in person as well as digitally, we can see even more just how essential our teachers are to the students and the communities that they serve. I want to send a special shout out to Mrs. Frances Wilson. Mrs. Wilson is a teacher at Chester Arthur Elementary School who first started working in the district, in a district classroom on September 1, 1974. She is the district's longest serving teacher. And after nearly 47 years with the district, Ms. Wilson will retire at the end of this school year. So I thank her for her service and commitment to our students, and once again want to acknowledge and recognize Ms. Frances Wilson. And to all of our teachers, you're doing a phenomenal job. You've been doing a phenomenal job since the start of this pandemic. And I want to say thank you for your commitment to our students' families, and all of the communities that you serve. Next week, students who are in phase 3 of the hybrid learning model will begin in-person learning. We're finalizing the total numbers and schedules for this group based on the results of the selection survey that closed last week. This cohort includes students in grades 6 through 9 and students with complex needs in grades 10 through 12 who will return on Monday, May 10th. Last month, we also shared information about our summer learning and enrichment programming and the expanded opportunities this summer for students in K through 12th grade. We encourage families and students who are interested to register soon, since placement in each site will be on a first-come, first-served basis in alignment with health and safety protocols set by the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. The final deadline for registration is next Friday, May 14th. Students and families can register for programming on their website at philasd.org/summer2021. The 2021 district parent-wide survey will close on May 14th. Families have 1 week left to offer feedback and help, and that feedback helps to inform our work to improve our schools and our services to students and families. Please visit philasd.org/DWS, that's district-wide survey, to complete the 10-minute survey, and do that today if you can. There are some additional recognitions. As many of you know, Sunday is Mother's Day, and so I'd like to take this time to recognize and thank all of those who have the honor of being a mother or serving as a mother figure. Your love, support, and guidance is appreciated year-round, but especially so on this day, on this Sunday, which is Mother's Day. And lastly, this is a reminder that all district offices and schools will be closed next Thursday, May 13th, in observance of Eid al-Fitr, and offices and schools will open as normal on Friday, May 14th. Once again, all district offices and schools will be closed next Thursday, May 13th, in observance of Eid al-Fitr, and offices and schools will reopen as normal on Friday, May 14th. And now for our main topic. Last May, our Office of Student Supports announced a wonderful program in conjunction with the Uplift for Grieving Children, Philly Hopeline. Staffed by clinicians employed by Uplift, Philly Hopeline offers counseling services for students, parents, and guardians. Established at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the district and Uplift worked to ensure that those in need could get access to support and resources, even while staying in their homes to mitigate the spread of the virus. Counselors were available by phone, video chat, and by text. As you can imagine, with the pandemic and incidents around racial injustice, our students and our families have had a lot to deal with over the last year. And the Philly Hope Line in specific, as well as our relationship with Uplift Center for Grieving Children in general, has meant so much to our efforts to protect and nurture the emotional health of our students. At this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Jamie Banks to give a brief overview of the ways in which her team supports our students before turning things over to Darcy Krause. Jamie, thanks for being with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Haight. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jamie Banks. I'm Deputy Chief of Prevention, Intervention, and Trauma here at the district. So over the last 14 months has been challenging for everyone across the nation. It's been filled with times of uncertainty, loss, confusion, isolation, food and housing insecurities, trauma, and more. The pandemic has forced everyone to make adjustments in their lives. When we had to close our physical buildings last spring, we knew this would have many ramifications for our students and families. Our schools play such a vital role for our students, and that includes providing a safe space for them. It's a place where they're caring adults. It's a source of for food. It's also a social place to be around friends and learn. So when our students no longer had the opportunity to do this in person, and we had to implement digital learning, it was very important to us that we figure out ways to support our students in these areas during this time of uncertainty. In my position, I understand the importance of mental health. Our emotional, psychological, and social well-being are all factors in how we think, feel, and act. Connection, and interaction with others is vital. In an effort to support our students, we've implemented layers of supports at both the school and district level. At the district level, we have a number of partnerships to help support our staff, students, and families, including with Uplift Center for Grieving Children. 1 year ago, through this partnership, we created the Philly Hope Line as a free resource for students and caregivers who are struggling with emotions, thoughts, and stressors due to the pandemic. The Hope Line is staffed by master's level clinicians from Uplift that provide free mental health counseling, emotional wellness, grief support, and strategies for coping with COVID-related losses. Additionally, they assist with making referrals to any additional supports the caller may need. We know our students and families have endured so much over the past year, but we also know how resilient they are. We know with additional support, our students and families will continue to thrive even through difficult times. And even as we begin to see places open up and begin to return to some sense of normalcy, we know that this can bring various emotions too. If you are feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, alone, confused, sad, angry, or any other emotion, support is available. And the Hope Line is, of course, I'm going to say a call and text away. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darcy Krause to speak more about the details of the impact of the Philly Hope Line. Darcy.
Thank you, Dr. Banks. It's my pleasure to be here today. So since last May, as Dr. Banks was saying, the Philly Hope Line has been a critical resource for the children and families in Philadelphia as they've dealt with the ripple effects of the pandemic, gun violence, and racial trauma. It's provided a safe place to access mental health support with our clinicians staffing the line 10 hours a day, Monday through Friday. We're really grateful for this partnership, and I'm here today to share some of the qualitative and quantitative data that shows the impact of the Philly Hope Line. Quantitatively, since the Philly Hope Line's inception, we have received 281 Hope Line calls, with the average call time running 23 minutes. But we've also found that with calls that are classified internally for us, but as grief support and emotional support, they have a much longer average of almost 2 times that length of 35 to 40 minutes. And I also want to note that we've seen an increase in this category of calls in 2021. Calls from youth as opposed to caregivers also tend to run longer, averaging 2 times the length of calls from caregivers. Each month, we average approximately 25 calls. These numbers do not always tell the whole story, and I actually have a recent story with minor changes for confidentiality that I'd like to share with you today. Recently, we had a grandmother who called the Hope Line. She's a caregiver for her 2 grandchildren, both of whom attend the school district of Philadelphia schools. She was calling because one of her grandchildren in the past few weeks had trouble falling asleep, struggling with repeated nightmares, and her behavior during the day had changed as well. She was more withdrawn, not talking or sharing as much. The caregiver shared that due to their close relationship, she knew her grandchild's behavior was new and also out of character for her. In the conversation, the caregiver shared with the Uplift clinician that the child's mother had died many years earlier when the child was just a toddler. The Uplift clinician shared some psychoeducation about children's grief with the caregiver, explaining that grief bursts can happen for youth when something abrupt or traumatic happens in their current environment, even if the actual death happened many years ago, since grief is a lifelong journey and often doesn't have a set timeline or endpoint. As the clinician and caregiver were brainstorming together about what might have possibly brought this on, the caregiver shared that an older student at the child's school had recently been killed. Even though this child did not really know her classmate who died very well, any death or recent loss, even someone in our community who we're not close with, can impact our grief if we've already had other very significant losses. The caregiver was able to plan with a clinician how to talk to the child, and the clinician shared some resources over email with her as well. A few weeks later, the caregiver called the Hope Line back and shared an update with the same clinician. She and her grandchild have been talking much more about the child's grief, not only from her classmate who died, but also from her mother's death many years ago, and the different emotions that it's brought up for her. The child reported that she felt relieved that her grandmother helped her connect the death of her classmate to her grief from her mother's death, because she can better understand now how the newer loss impacted her, and that any thoughts and feelings in our grief is normal. She's also starting to sleep better, and the caregiver has noticed the child is back to sharing her thoughts and feelings much more as well. The grandmother said, and this is a quote, "Our grief is a long road, but we know we can travel it together." I think that qualitative data really helps tell the whole story. I also just want to give a little bit of information about some of the special features that we offer on the Hope Line. Philadelphia Hope Line has interpretation services, and we're able to use these services to support callers in over 100 languages by looping in a third-party interpreter within under 2 minutes. The interpreter translates between the caller and the clinician for the duration of the call. We've also created some specialty shifts. So we have our Spanish-speaking shift, which is for Spanish-speaking callers who can speak with an Uplift clinician directly in Spanish, so there's no interpreter. And we have 6 hours per week. There's Thursdays from 1 to 4 p.m. and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And when they call during these hours, they'll speak with a bilingual, bicultural clinician who's fluent in both English and Spanish. We also have a shift for grieving youth in the LGBTQIA+ community. There are 7 hours per week, Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m. and Fridays from 1 to 4 p.m. that queer and trans youth who are seeking grief or emotional support can call the Hope Line and speak to a clinician with experience working with youth in the LGBTQIA+ community. With the Hope Line, we've actually seen a majority of callers being caregivers, probably about 40%. And they're calling that they have children who've experienced deaths, losses, traumas. We see a smaller percentage of more like of youth than caregivers, but they, as I said earlier, those average twice as long. While this was traditionally marketed for youth and families, we've actually been able to support school staff and school communities after a tragic death in the school community, a loss in their own personal lives or collective traumatic experiences. And we are able to apprise our team. So if there's something that's happened at a specific school community, we'll actually make sure the team knows in advance so that they get calls in. Families don't have to retell the story and go through that difficult, and they can just say, I'm calling from this school or this community, and the clinician will immediately know what they're calling in relation to. When caregivers or youth contact the Hope Line, we're able to make referrals to other agencies as necessary, or even if there's grief refer them into our Uplift Family Services programming, which is free and currently virtual. And we offer this year round. So this is something that we can definitely get kids looped into. I want to thank the school district for partnering with Uplift on this important resource and endeavor. The Hope Line can be reached Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. at 1-833-PHL-HOPE. And you can visit our website, www.upliftphilly.org, for more information about specialty days and hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darcy. And thanks for sharing that story too, because that's an example of the types of support that our young people and their families have access to through the partnership that we have with you. And I'll also share that in weekly meetings that I have with other superintendents from around the country, I talk about the work that we've done in partnership with the Uplift Center for Grieving Children, and they are all enamored with that partnership. And so thank you. And Dr. Jamie Banks, thank you for the work that you and your team are doing in their Office of Student Support Services as well to support our students and their families. And so, Monica, at this time, I think we'll take questions first around the topic and then on other issues.
Yes, thank you. Yes, again, if you have a question, please use the raise hand icon and we will call on you in the order in which the hands have been raised. Our first question goes to Mike DiNardo of KYW News Radio.
Thank you, Monica. Morning, everybody. My question is for Darcy. Have you noticed any common themes among the callers to the Hope Line? And can you tell us whether those themes, whether the topics have changed or evolved over the past year? Were there some that you received early on and some that you're receiving now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Yes. So I think early on we were receiving a lot more kind of calls around isolation, because if you, as we all recall, in that first few, weeks to months, there was a lot of people were inside, we were kind of staying indoors. So we've received a lot more kind of isolation focused calls, mental health, feeling down, feeling lonely, anxious, a lot of anxiety, obviously. I think that the anxiety has probably persisted. What we've seen now, and as I mentioned a little bit, was that we're seeing a little bit more grief and loss specific calls. Speaking from a clinical perspective, I think that some of that is probably, we've now had about a year of this. So there have been losses to the pandemic, to gun violence, and that as people are processing that, we're actually starting to get more of those calls where people need support, where they're seeing, like that young woman I was sharing about, actually, exhibiting some behaviors and that her grandmother picked up on. So I think that that's the general shift, but generally needing social support, not necessarily having the networks there, caregivers struggling with the kids who are down, really, and who need support around how to support them. Those are kind of the general themes that we've seen.
And you mentioned the one grandmother. What kind of feedback have you gotten, and are you making a difference? Do you know that you're making a difference?
It's hard with grief because in loss, because it can be a long-term experience, right? But obviously we've had situations like this grandmother. There was one kind of almost about a year ago now too, where there was another grandmother who was actually trying to get grandkids connected to the schools, and we were able to get them connected to their school counselor, give them support, and actually it was one of the families that the district had been trying to actually access. So I think that we've had opportunities, and some of the callers do call over and over again. So we're able to hear kind of how it's progressed for them and provide continuing support. So qualitatively, I think that we know for sure that we've made a difference in some very, very real cases, and for some real people out there who just need support.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Our next question comes from Johan Calhoun with Chalkbeat.
Yes, one question. What's the process after you guys get a call from someone who has experienced extreme trauma? You mentioned you're getting calls related to gun violence and related to the pandemic. So if you come across someone who has experienced extreme trauma, what's the next stage?
If there's extreme trauma, we would actually probably make a referral to an outside agency providing TFCBT or some other trauma, evidence-based trauma-focused intervention. We do, I mean, that being said, we do have gun violence, folks in our groups, both caregivers and children, who sometimes will actually access our services alongside other services they're receiving. Because one of the, issues that sometimes happens is that folks are focused on the grief because that's what they're feeling right in that moment. And obviously there's still trauma that needs support, but they're presenting with the grief. And because our services are free, they can access our service, our grief groups, and seek other services without any sort of issues with insurance or anything like that.
Okay. At any point, do you guys make house calls, or is all of the service over the phone?
So all the Hope Line services are over the phone. All of the Uplift grief groups are currently virtual, but in hopefully post-pandemic times, they've been offered. Pre-pandemic, we had 6 locations around the city where we offer family service groups, and we have historically also offered groups in schools.
And the information that you're getting from these calls, are you sharing them with city departments, let's say the police department and the health department as well? And to add to that, you broke down different topics, the leading issues, but I'm wondering the geographic areas. What are some of the geographic areas that you're getting the most calls from?
So we don't necessarily report out anything. It's a confidential line. And so the only kind of report outs that we've probably done to date is that I gave testimony to City Council for our gun violence panel, giving similar information to make them aware. From a geographic perspective, we don't really, when folks are calling in, we're actually really kind of dealing with the mental health issues they're dealing with. We don't typically gather geographical information beyond maybe what school they go to, if they're willing to share that. So I can access that information if you wanted me to follow up on that. But generally speaking, I think that it's really all around the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I would like to add to that response in terms of your trauma question. So we, are constantly through our counselors, our STEP teams, looking for students or families who need additional supports in those areas and making those connections. So if specific traumas related services are needed, we're making those connections. And within those services, or if they're part of our STEP team, there is case management, which could look like home visitation or helping in the community if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Banks. Our next question comes from Chanel Hill, the Philadelphia Tribune.
Good morning. This question is for Darcy. You mentioned earlier that a lot of the caregivers reach out to the Hope Line. Do you have an estimate as far as how many students are reaching out to the Hope Line?
The percentage that I have in my notes is that it's 14% are youth. So a lot more of school staff, caregivers, with the caregivers being 40%. So another 30 some percent, being kind of general community as well as school staff.
And when the students call, what are typically the topics or issues that they discuss?
So kind of talking about their own mental health issues, talking about their struggles, sometimes loss, but I think that oftentimes that's more directed from the caregivers about the children they're supporting. But really, I remember there was this one young woman who had called and she was just kind of struggling, having a hard time. And at the end of the call, I think she's like, I'm gonna tell my friends about this because this was actually really easy and not it can seem like I don't know about this, but she felt better, and we've definitely had some youth who also called a few times, just and they've gotten to know some of our clinicians, I think, so they'll know what shift they're on. So it really is, it's a good connection point for youth to feel a little less isolated and supported.
And then my last question for you is just moving forward, when all students are back in the school building, will the program continue, and will the program continue to work with schools?
So I'll defer some of this to Dr. Banks too, but we are funded through through 2021 for the Hope Line. We plan to have it open. And I will say when we first started, we also altered our hours. So we're used to just kind of tweaking the hours as necessary in order to best serve the community and the families and kids. Dr. Banks, do you want to add anything to that?
So we think, I mean, as we've gone through this, we see this a very helpful resource for multiple reasons. I mean, Darcy, this isn't just an agency that parents are calling. They have a connection with us. And so as Darcy said, there's been situations where a child or family will call and her team knows the counselor, and so they can pull them in. And so for those reasons, I think we're invested in figuring out a way to continue, and also trying to increase the student utilization of the set service too, to make sure that they feel comfortable and know that this is internal. This isn't external service.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. Our next question comes from Kristen Graham with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Good morning, everyone. I am just wondering, I feel like I've reported this last year and I can't remember. What's the budget for the Hope Line, the annual budget?
Annual budget for the Hope Line is $250,000.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Are there any other questions regarding Philly Hope Line or children's mental health awareness? Mike DiNardo.
Just one quick follow-up to Chanel and to Kristen. Darcy, you said you were funded through 2021. Are we talking the end of the school year, end of the fiscal year, end of the calendar year? We want to be clear.
Absolutely, yes, through December of 2021.
Thank you. Okay.
For the calendar year, yes. And then the funding too is also is provided from an external anonymous source. I just want to note that as well.
Thanks.
Our next question is from Dale Mezzacappa with TalkBeat.
Yeah, just one quick question about the age range of the students who called into the helpline.
So typically it's more of adolescent to teens accessing without. We have had some younger kids, but they typically call with the caregiver, or the caregiver calls and then we loop them in. But so when it's one-on-one with just the kids, it's typically middle school and high school ages.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. Are there any other questions regarding Uplift, Philly Hope Line, or children's mental health awareness? Great. So we can open up. We have a little bit of time left for additional questions. If Darcy, Dr. Banks, if you all would like to stay on, you're more than welcome to, or you can hop off. All right. Our first question comes from Kristen Graham with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Dr. Haidt, I wasn't clear. Are the numbers yet available? I know that schools know who's coming on Monday in the 6 to 9 range. Have you crunched those numbers? Do you know who opted in?
Actually, I do, Kristen. So
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, and naturally they're subject to change, but we have
Sure.
numbers as of yesterday.
Mhm.
And we posted some information on, we actually now post on a dashboard the numbers who are participating in hybrid. And so the numbers for Monday are about 6,800 students. That's about 18% of the eligible students in that category.
And do you have a number for overall from the pre-K then through 9 and complex needs kids, like in the universe of kids who are eligible to return? What's the district-wide percentage of those who have returned?
Yeah, so in the grand scheme, the number of children who have returned, about 26,000 out of almost 95,000, 96,000, and so it's like 27%.
Okay. And obviously the numbers are lower in this last group, the 6 through 9 group. Do you attribute that to the age range? Do you think it's the time of year? I mean, we've talked about at some point, it's like diminishing returns to bring kids back. Why do you think fewer kids have opted in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a combination, and we'll know more when we get those young people in and talk to those families. But I mean, as an example, like, so pre-K started at a much lower number than it is now. But as children started to come back, then more pre-K and kindergarten families wanted their children to return as well. So this number could increase over a period of time if in fact there is space available, and in most cases spaces are available, particularly in the third phase. But we won't know more until we get those young people back in and determine what it is that they're interested in. And so we were anecdotally seeing at the beginning of this a lot of the 8th graders who wanted to return simply because it was a transition year. But the largest number are actually 9th graders, the largest percentage of 9th graders. And so it remains to be seen. I think it's probably a combination of all of those things that you just suggested.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Our next question comes from Mike DiNardo.
Hello again. With students or with children 12 and above soon to be eligible for the COVID vaccine, does the district have any plans to facilitate that? Have you been talking with CHOP, for example, about ways to vaccinate students before September?
We do, Mike. I mean, in fact, we have been talking to CHOP the entire time. We started conversations with the Children's Hospital talking about the 16-year-olds and above, and really trying to establish in places for those individuals to go in order to receive the vaccine from staff members at the Children's Hospital. We're finalizing details on that, and so schedules will be coming out very soon. And then once approved, if we want to do the same with any young people who are eligible for the vaccine, no matter how young. And so we would be doing the same. We've been in constant communication, and we remain in communication with the Children's Hospital around organizing a program to support young people when those vaccines are available.
Would they be at facilities outside of schools, or would you be providing school facilities to kind of make that easier for families?
I think that it all depends on, because medical professionals have to do this, and there are certain things that must be in place. There are staffing concerns and all those types of things. And so that remains to be seen. If we can, we will. But we don't know what it's going to require as of yet. And so right now, we're talking about facilities in and around the city of Philadelphia, but they will likely be medical facilities.
Likely existing facilities that are already giving
the
like vaccines.
Like city clinics or children's hospital facilities or doctor's offices.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike. Our next question comes from Johan Calhoun.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of Mike and the vaccine, are you going to push students to get the vaccine before all grades return to school in the fall?
Thanks, Johan. Great question. We're going to push for everybody to get the vaccine. I mean, as many people who can get the vaccine. Now, pushing versus requiring are two different things. We can't require it, but we will push in the form of making sure it's available, making sure individuals have access to it, making sure that individuals know about it. But we will certainly push for all staff and as many students as possible who are eligible to receive the vaccine.
Okay, and that's any vaccine. That could be Johnson & Johnson, that could be Moderna or Pfizer, correct?
Whatever is available. Yes, sir.
Okay, so in doing this, you are going to create like a system of where they can go, like you said, CHOP, whatnot.
Yeah, and I want to make sure this point is clear. It is our work with the Children's Hospital and other medical institutions that would then lead this effort, just like they led the effort on the staff vaccines. They will be leading the effort, and we will be working with them to do that. And so we will make the information available. We will ensure that if in fact there's the ability to use schools, we'll have schools available. And we'll certainly communicate it to all of our families and certainly push to get those individuals to take advantage of it. But we would not be coordinating it ourselves simply because we have to rely on the Philadelphia Department of Public Health and the Children's Hospital or any other medical institution that wants to support us.
Okay. A group of area school superintendents are calling for charter funding reform. They are saying the current funding model for charter schools is unfair and outdated, and that it diverts needed dollars away from their districts. Do you agree with this notion? And if you do, can you provide an example from the Philadelphia School District?
Yes, I mean, I do agree with it. And I do agree that the way special education is funded for young people who are receiving special education services at a charter school, and those individuals are paid based on what we spend on special education. But if in fact we're dealing with the more severe types of educational issues, naturally we're going to spend a lot more. And so one simple change is to make sure that it is funding based on the child's need and not based on the district spend. And I think that in and of itself would make a significant difference. In fact, here in Philadelphia, that difference is like a $52 million difference.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jan. Are there any other questions for Dr. Haidt?
Dale?
Dale?
Hi. Could you, do you know, have you tracked what percentage of the staff has actually gotten the vaccine?
We have not, Dale, simply because we don't have access to those records. And it's likely that we will have to ask individuals if in fact they have received a vaccine, not suggesting they have to get it, but if they have received it, because it actually matters for individuals who come in contact if you are vaccinated or you're not. And so we will have to ask that question eventually or soon, but we have not tracked the numbers. We had about 12,000 individuals get the vaccine, but they were all staff, get the vaccine that was offered through the Children's Hospital. But now we have other medical institutions that are also helping us to vaccine others, but we probably haven't. We're estimating about 55% of all staff have the vaccine.
Did you say 55%?
That's a rough
Estimating?
estimate. Yeah, yeah.
And the other question I had has to do with, could you just clarify the issue with standardized testing, and is it being done? Is it up to the school? How long is it taking? Is it depending on the grade? And, you know, and there seems to be a lot of opt-out talk. You know, are you finding that the students who go back are opting out? Is there any other information you can give about how standardized testing is playing out?
Yeah, no, standardized testing is, so state assessments are going to happen. And we have to make a good faith effort to offer state assessments. We're offering all of the PSSAs. We're pushing the keystones to the fall. And then there's a process for individuals to opt out. The opt-out numbers, as I can tell, aren't any more significant than they've been in previous years. But we just want to make sure that that information is available. We've also indicated that we're not using assessment information, state assessment information for high school selection. We're not using it for teacher evaluation. We're not using it for any of the high stakes decisions that it's been used for in the past. And if there's a benefit, it actually gives us information about where children are after spending a year of virtual instruction. And so it does provide important information, but it's easy for individuals to opt out. They can do that by just emailing their child's principal.
Okay, just one more quick thing. So you said that, following up on Kristen's earlier question about the percentages of students who are choosing hybrid, and you said that the highest percentage is among the ninth graders. I'm wondering if you had a grade breakdown of, say, in the sixth to ninth grade group, what percentage in each grade has chosen to do hybrid?
I don't have that breakdown. I just know that the highest percentage was, actually the highest percentage is complex need, excuse me. So the highest percentage is not the highest number, but it's the highest percentage is complex need. But the highest number of students in the category are ninth graders. And I don't have the breakout of all, but I want to go back to a point I made earlier that we have now put this information on a dashboard that's on the website. And it's on the same webpage as the COVID dashboard. So you can either click on hybrid selection or COVID testing and get this information. So I haven't been able to pull it up while we're on Zoom, but it's available there.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.